Madlab Performance presents The Lab Podcast. Here's your host and chief mad scientist, Dan Gilbert.
Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of The Lab. I'm Dan Gilbert, obviously, and sitting here with the smartest person I know, my co-host, Luke Hillman.
Always.
Today we're going to be talking to you guys about mobility and stability, some ways to improve mobility and stability, some common issues that surface, kind of just some things to look for and to help you in your own programming. Is that about correct, Luke?
Yeah, absolutely.
Here. So let's start with what they are.
Yeah, so we definitely want to go in with what? Mobility first?
Yeah, so mobility is really, we're looking at not only range of motion with a joint, so not just range of motion, but we're also looking at movement, like how you do certain movements using either a joint or a specific set of joints. I think that about sums that up. And stability is looking at how to stabilize a joint or a certain set of joints through certain movements, if that makes sense. And we'll start to get a little more advanced with that as we go through this.
All right, so definitely one of the things that I would say most people have, mobility, stability, sounds the same to me. What's the difference, Dan?
Yeah, I think that is one of the big things. And I also think that people get confused.
You're mobile, you're stable, right?
Yeah, so that's actually a giant problem. So you have people that are hypermobile, so they'll have those, they'll straighten their arm and their elbow, like poke out the other side, and stability becomes a big issue because that joint is supposed to be stable, not hypermobile like that. And hypermobility does cause its problems. Obviously, immobility causes giant problems as well. I think the best way to go about this, Luke, is to go through which joints should be mobile and which joints should be stable. Because that's something that people get confused a lot.
Yeah, I mean, most people really, I would say, even before I even got into this, you know what I mean? Like, if that's a hard contrast, I would say, a lot of trainers probably can give you the contrast between mobility and stability. I
used to talk about ankle stability all the time.
Yeah.
And the ankle wants to be mobile.
Yeah.
But let's go from the feet up.
All right, let's go from the feet up.
So let's even start at the toes. Toes need to be nice and mobile. All right, you got to have mobile toes. Okay? Feet need to be stable. And a lot of times I think when people are talking about ankle stability, they're really talking about foot stability. That's what you want. You want stability through the foot, and then you want mobility through the ankle. Stability through the knee, mobility through the hips, stability through the core and the lower back, the thoracic spine, so kind of mid upper back. You want that to be nice and mobile. Your scapula, so your shoulder blade, that needs to be stable. Glenohumeral joint, so really your shoulder, nice and mobile. Neck needs to be stable. Going down the arm, we talked about the elbow already. Elbow needs to be stable. Wrist needs to be mobile. Hand stable. Fingers mobile. Right?
Yeah. I don't think I've seen you this happy for a topic, by the way.
I love this topic.
As you are right now.
So this is probably my favorite. One of my favorite fitness topics.
Absolutely.
It's something I get very passionate about, and I draw an amazing picture depicting the different joints that need to be mobile and stable of a really, really slick-looking stick figure, if you can even call it that. I don't even know if my 8-year-old would recognize it as a stick figure, but I think it's pretty amazing.
So a common area we talked about was the foot. So I would say as trainers, see a lot of issues with the foot, right?
We do. And again, if we let's go back to the joints real quick.
Okay.
Before we talked about the foot, you'll notice how all the joints kind of take turns on what they want to do.
Yeah.
Right? You have a stable joint, so the two corresponding joints need to be mobile, right? You have a mobile joint, the two corresponding joints, or adjacent joints is really what I should say, need to be stable. So knee and its adjacent joints are the hip and the ankle. So the knee needs to be stable, therefore the hip and the ankle need to be mobile. what happens in a lot of these issues that people have when they're starting to have pain or a lack of performance is they'll lack mobility or stability in a joint. So let's use the hip for example.
Yeah.
Actually, let's use your foot.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I know. Let's start with the foot. Let's go with where you're going. I'm getting too excited.
He's way too excited.
Too pepped up here. I'm starting to rise up and go above my microphone.
Got a little sugar high over here.
That as well. So the foot needs to be nice and stable. If you have an unstable foot, then you're going to try to get stability from the two corresponding joints.
But don't I want my foot to be mobile, though? It bends.
Oh, Lord. No, we do not want a mobile. Mobile foot is going to get you.
How many times do you hear that?
You do hear that.
A lot, right?
I need a stable ankle.
Yeah.
And then you lack ankle mobility, and that causes all sorts of issues.
How many basketball players do you see with ankle braces for no reason?
That is another thing.
Yep.
All right, so if my foot is unstable, my ankle is going to try to create stability for my foot.
Yep.
Right? So then I'm going to lose ankle mobility. If I lose ankle mobility, then I'm going to try to make up for mobility in my ankle, the lack of mobility in my ankle, with my knee. You actually see a lot of basketball players will start to wear, and you wear braces for different reasons, but people need to understand when they're wearing some of these things or they're restricting mobility of their ankle with certain shoes and those kind of things, that they could be causing another problem.
It's a temporary fix.
Right.
You have to be actively, if you're using, let's say you're in a game, competition or whatever, if you're using this to get through that, you have to also be doing these other things to improve that issue. And you want to get that ankle, be able to get that ankle brace off you as soon as possible.
Right, because otherwise you seriously compromise the knee joint, possibly.
Yeah.
And you see a lot of ACL tears,
Yep.
A lot of meniscus injuries, a lot of things like that. Because of a lack of ankle mobility, they're not able to create angles in their ankles, especially athletes, when you're trying to change direction or you're trying to jump or you're trying to sprint or doing anything through contact. And then the knee needs to create more of an angle to make up for the lack of the angle the ankle can make or cannot make. And then because the knee is not meant to be that mobile, injuries can occur.
Yeah.
Right. And we see that all the time.
So it starts from the foot up.
The foot up. Yeah. I'd like to look at the body a lot of times, the foot up.
Yeah. And so a lot of the things stem. And then obviously we got issues with the knee compensating. It's going to drive right up to the hip, right?
Yeah. So you get a lot of your knee injuries. You kind of look at, are the hips mobile? Yep. Are the ankles mobile? If the hip has some mobility concerns and the ankle has some mobility concerns, then that could be why there's pain in the knee. Right?
And and you would say probably a lot of, at least with youth athletes, I would say a lot of injuries are caused from that. How many times do we see that?
I think that 90% of the athletes that first walk in the door with us, we say ankle mobility issues.
Yeah.
In fact, I almost want to say 90% of the population.
Yeah.
In general.
And how little is it addressed?
It's almost never addressed.
It's never addressed.
Because people, a lot of times I'll take a look at this from a squat. So people just have like a non-weighted overhead squat, and there'll be a lot of movement, unnecessary movement in the lower body. So heels will be coming off the floor, knees will be shooting forward. Sometimes the upper body, instead of staying in an angle with their shins, will lean way too far forward because they're trying to make up for angles that they can't get other places. A lot of times we find out that to be the ankles.
Yeah.
Right? And then we'll have them squat with their heels raised, only for an assessment purposes.
Yeah.
We would never have you squat with your heels raised for an actual squat because we're not trying to add strength onto a dysfunction. But from that assessment, if somebody squats better that way, we've created more of an angle in their ankles. If they squat better, then we can see that ankle mobility was severely limiting that. And then if it's something happening in something as simple as the squat, it's definitely going to happen in something more advanced, so as when they sprint or they jump or they're changing directions or whatever else that they're doing that's more complicated.
And that's what I was thinking about, because we were talking about, like, you named all these issues you see in a stationary, controlled, unweighted movement.
Right.
These issues pass. I mean, imagine, I'm going to use basketball as an example again. You're on the court jumping around, all that up and down you're doing. If you can't even do something stationary, I can't imagine in a fast-paced sport like that, I mean, no wonder people get injured
it's just bad movement after bad movement in volume, and then also usually done fairly ballistically, right?
Yeah.
So it's hard to imagine kind of a worse atmosphere. And then people wonder why they get these non-contact injuries or they have these pains crop up, and they'll be like, oh, I'm getting old, and they're only like 24, 25. I mean, really 30, 31, even and stuff like that. Like it's not that. It's just your angles are wrong because of limited mobility.
And they'll be just and not to cut you off, but as they'll be too, they'll always like kind of be like, this is just the way I am. How many times do you hear that?
I hate hearing
It's just the way I am.
Yeah.
And most of the times when you take a look at them and you assess them, it's not the way they are.
Right. It's just
you got to correct some things. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And if somebody has a lack of ankle mobility, I always like to look at foot stability as well.
Yep.
Because the two go hand in hand. It's hard to tell which one came first. So you want to improve both. Can that individual stand just on their single leg? It's amazing how many advanced athletes, you have them stand on one leg and their foot shakes all over the place. And you're like, where do you feel this? I feel this a lot in my foot. Oh, my foot's starting to cramp. And we're like, okay, you're obviously lacking foot stability. And you're an advanced athlete, you're a powerful athlete, this could cause a lot of issues. Let's stabilize the foot while we're mobilizing the ankle, right? So I think sometimes it can't just be as easy as, here's a joint, here's where we have pain, let's just improve the mobility or stability here. You got to look at the adjacent joints, and sometimes it's multiple throughout the body. You know, you could have ankle mobility issues that are leading to lower back issues, right?
Yeah.
So it could go up that far, or even that are causing shoulder issues, like that are somewhere.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's where I wanted to go.
Yes, sir.
I would say, well,
I wish people told me that more often.
But most people would say, smarter people, that the shoulder is the most complicated joint. Correct?
It does the most movement, yeah.
It does the most movement. So, I mean, I've seen it a ton. So if I've seen it a ton, I know you've seen it a ton. Shoulder mobility issues, rotator cuff issues, impingement, whatever word they want to use for it, people have so many issues. How can we, from a mobility and stability standpoint, assess that and address that?
I think something that a lot of people don't figure into shoulder issues is, because the mobility of the shoulder is pretty easy to look at.
Yeah.
Right? All right, well, your shoulder's tight. I'm glad at least if somebody's looking at that, at least they got to that point.
Yeah.
Which is important, because sometimes that's not the case, and they'll go, oh, well, there's some wear and tear on the shoulder, so that's what must be causing pain. Let's give you a cortisone shot or something like that, or just take some pills, which again drives us nuts. But if they're looking at the shoulder and they're going, well, Luke, you have a lack of shoulder mobility, that's why your shoulder's hurting you. At least that's been looked at.
Yeah.
However, I would also want to look at, what is the scapula doing through their movements?
That's
right?
another thing. Yep.
Yeah.
So with the shoulders, another thing, we have to look more at the posterior side, not just that anterior side.
Right.
A lot of issues probably could be resolved, would you say, on the posterior side?
A lot of times, I mean, most of our movement, we're very posterior dominant creatures. So I would want to see the shoulder blade. I want to see if, you have somebody doing push-ups, or they're doing like some kind of simple inverted pull.
Yeah.
Like some kind of TRX row or something, and their shoulders are shooting back and forth all over the place. So they're not creating a stable shoulder joint. They're not creating a stable scapula. Scapula is moving all over the place. They're going to try to get stability from the glenohumeral joint. So that's going to stiffen that joint up to protect the surrounding tissue, right? So I would start to teach some scapular stability, but I'd also want to assess it to see if that was an issue, usually so. Also, another thing that people don't think about is the neck. What's the neck doing? I would even start to include the upper trap in that.
Yeah.
Is the upper trap bouncing all over the place? Is that trying to compensate for different things? How stable is that person's neck? And that's something that a lot of people don't look at in any way. If you don't have neck stability, then you're going to start to stiffen up in the shoulders to make up for that lack of stability in the neck, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and this causes a giant issue.
So you're telling me so when we're addressing it, we already identified it. We got some shoulder mobility issues, yada, yada. How do we address it? How can I make my life a little better? I mean, I'm thinking my shoulder's weak. I need to strengthen it up. I'm going to hop on that shoulder press. Isn't that what I should do? All
right, so we definitely want to look at ratios. So in a normal human being, we could even just look at simple programming right away, right?
Yeah.
What does this person do through their programming? A lot of lifting for general population we see, not everybody, but a lot of the times, thank you for Bench Press Monday.
Yeah.
They come in, they do a lot of horizontal pushing movements like the bench press. They might go, I do a lot of push-ups at home, stuff like that. So a lot of horizontal pushing, probably not paying attention to the shoulders or the position of the shoulders or where their elbow angles or anything like that, where those are. And they're not getting the proper ratio of pulling, especially horizontal pulling. So ideally, and again, this is a normal person with no issues, we would want to have, for every push, we'd want to have 3 pulling exercises.
Don't have to convince me on that.
Yeah, so you're pulling master there. And then for every vertical pull, we'd want to have 2 horizontal pulls. So vertical pull would be like your pull up, your strict lat pull down. When I say strict lat pull down, like you're upright, pulling straight down, right over your face. So if you start to lean back, then you're obviously starting to horizontal pull.
I'm actually glad you brought up those 2 terms, horizontal and vertical pull,
Yes.
because we were just talking, I think you even brought up to me, we were talking probably like a week or 2 ago about how the importance is more about the horizontal pulling than the vertical pulling.
Yes.
And that you're not necessarily achieving the same thing you are in the horizontal one as the vertical one, because you get a lot more lat, as we were saying, in the vertical one.
Let's talk about that,
Okay,
because that becomes very interesting. So horizontal pulling, a lot of times, horizontal pulling, when done right, should work a lot of your scapula stabilizers.
Yeah.
Right? So it should work a lot of your lower and mid trap are very important, your rhomboids, those kind of things that are going to stabilize your scapula. Again, but you have to cue it correctly so that the scapula is not winging all over the place, because that becomes its own problem. When you're doing vertical pulling, and you do use a little bit of lat in the horizontal pulling, especially if you're bringing the shoulder to bringing the elbow so that your humerus.
Yeah.
The elbow is not the humerus, but we're talking about the upper arm bone.
Let's drop it
so
down.
It's easier to cue from the elbows. So if your elbow is coming into your body, so that humerus bone is coming into the body. Again, I'm not calling the elbow the humerus bone. The upper arm bone.
Disclaimer.
Coming to right is going into adduction. So coming towards the body, then the lat's going to get involved. A lot of people, when they think of body balance, they're like, all right, I got to make sure that I am properly balanced. So I'm going to do chest and back, right?
Yeah.
You hear that all the time.
Yeah.
So if they're doing any kind of vertical pull that you do is going to be very lat dominant, because the lat helps to pull the scapula down, helps to pull the humerus down, and also, but then it also brings that humerus towards the body, and it also internally rotates the humerus, so it turns it inward towards the body, almost like if you were just holding out your arm and turning your thumb in towards yourself instead of opening your palm up.
So obviously, if you have major shoulder mobility issues, that vertical pull is not going to be for you.
Well, the vertical pull, the reason that becomes important is because there's two things the lat does that the chest also does.
Yeah.
So your pec major is your biggest part of your chest, also internally rotates the humerus, and then also adducts the humerus, so brings it towards the body. So if you are doing a pushing exercise and you're doing a lot of pressing for chest, and then all of a sudden you go into vertical pulling and you think that you're doing something symmetrical, you're not, because you are building that pec major and you're building that lat, and you are really starting to compound 2 muscles that bring that humerus into the body and then also internally rotate it, which is going to make your shoulders roll forward and kind of make you kind of into that classic like gorilla posture that I sit at the desk all the time posture.
That's a beast. What are you talking about? That's what I want to be.
Well, don't get me wrong. I got the longest arms in the world, so I'm a big gorilla and primate fan.
So
nickname Furious George over here.
Furious.
Yeah. So I'm all about it, but not really good for the shoulder joint.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that a lot of it starts in programming when we're talking about the shoulder. Besides just looking purely at the stability of the scapula, the mobility of the glenohumeral joint, and then also the stability of the neck.
Yeah.
So programming is always good to look at.
Dominant horizontal pulling.
We should all be very dominant in horizontal pulling. If you have shoulder issues, sometimes depending on what's going on, but really the majority of the time, you should start to look at even lessening your horizontal pushing, right? If vertical pressing bothers you, you might want to start to take some of that out. Mike, this is something that's near and dear to your heart, correct?
Yes, it is.
You had some shoulder issues, and then we didn't horizontal push, so no bench press or anything for you for 4 months?
For an extremely long amount of time, I was prohibited from doing anything bench pressy.
Yes, which is a scientific term for it as well. So even if the ratios were correct, for somebody like Mike used to be, I took out horizontal pushing completely for that.
Yeah.
Just because we were in a spot where there was shoulder pain and there was very limited shoulder mobility. No offense, Mike.
So he worked on it.
He did.
Yep.
And he's
in a lot better place, I would say, right, Mike?
Yeah, but it took a trainer to point out the fact that, bench pressing is not the all exercise.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot of stuff that we were doing that got me back into now I can do a bench press.
Yeah.
But I think it is something some people need to be aware of. And they also need to be aware of if bench pressing bothers you, it's not, you don't just go off of it and go, all right, well, I can never bench press anymore. I'm too old for that. Right? That's something that bothers me too, like we were talking about before.
I hate that word.
Yes.
Or that phrase. I'm too old. Look at Mike.
Well,
all right?
He's
Mike turned back the clock. Mike turned back the clock. All right?
He did. We were looking at photos today.
Mike is Madlab Performance.
He really is.
Right?
We looked at some old school photos, and you look like, we looked at photos from, I think, 2012. Was that 8 years ago?
Yeah.
So 8 years ago, and you look 10 years younger now than you did then.
Well, a lot of it has to do with I lost a lot of fat and I've gained a lot of muscle.
And that happened because you started moving well. We worked on the mere mobility and stability issues, which allowed you and opened up the gateway, I would say.
Yeah, movement.
Yeah.
That's the key thing. You've got to be able to move.
Mobility. Stability, important concepts.
That's right.
Here, plus Mike's he's just a monster. Anyway,
I agree.
So yeah, I don't know.
I've given enough compliments today. I don't know.
Mike might horizontal push more than me at this point.
Yeah, he's a beast. I'm just messing with Mike. But this is a great segue into what I think is really important is how important it would be to put into programming. Our programming has to be. We always look at strength stuff, cardio. But how much do you see mobility work thrown into programming? When should we do that, and why is it worth it?
I think that a lot of times mobility work is very reactive.
Yeah,
and we're a very reactive society, which is unfortunate. So, and I'm guilty of this as well. Something will start bothering me, so I'll start to do mobility for it. But really, I should be working on my overall mobility constantly,
even when you're feeling good.
Yes,
correct,
because it's a big part of fitness. If you want to be fit, and I don't care what you want to do, I don't care if it's something in athletics, because if you don't move well, then obviously you're not going to perform well, right? Plus you have injury risk.
I can tell you this, in my early youth, mobility, I didn't even know what that word meant.
Right.
I didn't know that was a word. You know what I mean? It was just low reps, push all day long. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean.
And like you said, just body breaks down. And then you're playing catch up at that point.
Exactly. And then you have general population. I just want to be healthier.
Yeah.
Well, then it's really important, because the less that you move, the less you're going to be able to do. It's going to affect your quality of life. Even if the only thing that's important to you is that you look good, maintaining proper mobility will give you good posture, and actually your body composition, whatever body composition you have, will look a lot better on you. So let's say I really want to grow my chest. Well, if I have that internally rotated shoulders, then no matter how big my chest is, it's going to look smaller than it actually is. If I'm trying to lose weight on my stomach, especially a lot of people say they have problems with their lower stomach. Well, if they have an anterior pelvic tilt, so that pelvis is tilted forward, then that lower belly is going to stick out. They're going to have an arch in the lower back, probably going to have some pain as well. But then they're not going to look as in shape and as good in the stomach area, which a lot of people
Well, how many people are about physique?
Yeah.
Big thing right now. If you have that pelvic tilt, it's going to mess with your physique. You're not going to be able to obtain that.
Yeah, exactly.
I know about that life.
Like it's good. Yeah, I do too. So, again, if you're sitting there and you go, I can never get rid of this lower belly fat, maybe you have some hip flexor issues. Maybe you have some lat issues that are causing that anterior pelvic tilt. And if you start to fix that, even without losing body fat, you all of a sudden look like you've lost body fat, which is something I don't think people think of, right? So it's important no matter what your goal is my rambling point here.
But mobility work doesn't look cool though.
Well, I think
why would I want to do mobility work? It doesn't look as good as my bent over row or my chest press.
I think that is the big thing, right? I think that if more people
it's demeaned.
Yeah, it really is.
Mobility work is like almost frowned upon by a certain gym population, I would say.
Right, because you feel like, all right, I'm going to the gym for X amount of time. I only have a certain amount of time. I need to lift this weight, lift this weight, do a little bit of cardio, get some sweat on, and go out. And that's going to be the most efficient use of my time. And that is not always true, right? And if I do that a lot and don't do any mobility work, then some other issues are going to crop up. I'm going to be able to move less because I might be in some pain, or I might not do things as well, so then I might not be as efficient. Plus, I might have those physique issues and postures on top of that. I think that is a big thing is people's time, what they think it is an efficient use of their time, almost never includes.
No, it never does. It never does.
And again, we've
all been there. Yeah.
You should always program mobility in. And if you're programming a whole mobility section or you're programming a mobility day or anything like that, that's excellent. But even if you're taking a mobility exercise and putting it at the end of a set.
Yeah, that's what I was going to get to.
You could definitely
just work
do that.
It in.
Yeah, so I mean, you could have like a strength and power set where you do like hex bar deadlift, and then you go into a broad jump, and then you do like a 90-90 internal rotation corrective, where you go into like some kind of chest opening exercise or something to work on just the stability of your scapula, right? Something corrective in there is not a bad way to do that, and that could be your active rest.
And in their way, I would say that's good for those people that don't necessarily want to do a whole day of mobility.
Yeah,
you know what I mean, and kind of like to do the other things as well. Because at the end of the day, you want to like being in the gym and doing what you do. So throwing that in, I would say with your strength and power sets, I would say is probably like ideal.
I will say the days that I think that is.
Yeah.
I think so too. I will say what helps me sometimes is I did this the other day, Mike. So what helps me is days that I'm exhausted or on the possible chance that I could be like hungover for a day and might not want to go to the gym.
Yeah.
Then I can go, all right, I know that I'll just go and just make this a mobility day.
Yeah.
And then I'll just do that because otherwise I might not have gone.
Yeah.
Or I might just do like a mobility session in my house.
Yeah.
Right. So then that way that takes care of a lot of that movement. And then you start to do more and more of those days. And if you make sure you do something every day, even if it's just like some quick mobility exercises instead of some weights or some cardio or something like that, then that goes a long way into your body just being more mobile and more stable.
And I think that's another thing too, when people look, they see all the professional athletes, like professional weightlifters and stuff like that, and they're always amazed by how almost durable they are and what they're able to achieve. They're doing this stuff.
Yes.
Consistently I would say every day. To
Absolutely.
some extent, mobility is being done every day. They take that extremely seriously, and I would say that's one of the reasons they're able to achieve what they're able to achieve is that discipline.
I mean, you got a lot of fighters and football players that are dedicating full sessions of an hour, 2 hours to this stuff, right? You have some of them that are getting dedicated yoga instructors for sports teams or for fight camps and stuff like that because it's so important that they work on these certain things.
Yeah. Keeps you ahead of the curve. So you don't be reactive, be somewhat proactive.
Exactly.
So you don't fall into that. I mean, anything can happen on the field, on the court or whatever, but stuff like a movement, imbalances, we can fix that. So let's take that worry out. I mean, of course, crazy things can happen, you know what I mean, because contact and stuff like that. But it's sad to see someone get hurt or miss it, you know what I mean, miss some time strictly for something you could fix.
Right.
And these things are fixable.
They 100%
and I think that's another thing that we definitely want to harp here is that you're not stuck. You know what I mean? There's no. I would say Mike. I'm gonna bring in Mike in again because Mike. I would say you're at a point where you feel stuck, where you felt like
I did feel stuck.
Yeah.
Not anymore. No,
not anymore. But I'm saying when you were talking about before you met Dan.
Yeah, that was it was depressing.
Yeah, it was depressing because you felt like there was nothing you could do about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But
and so how many people I would say get stuck in that rut? There's a lot.
It happens a lot.
Yeah, I got stuck in that rut for a bit when I had all my back and all those issues going on.
Well, I had a severe hip mobility issue that I knew about, and I had an ankle injury that caused an ankle mobility issue, and I decided to ignore it and continue playing through a rugby season, and then I ripped an ACL.
Yeah.
So I completely understand.
Yeah. All right, Dan. So another area, I would say a common area where a lot of our clients, a lot of people just complain about, I was a victim of it, low back pain.
Low back pain. So when I have somebody with low back pain, two areas that I want to look at really quickly are their core stability and their hip mobility.
Yeah.
Right? So I want to see, for core stability, I really want to see, are they able to hold a simple plank without recreating the pain or having a lot of tension in the lower back? Because to me, that's static anti-extension, and the extension we're talking about is the lumbar spine, so the lower back. When the lower back goes into extension, you'd want your core to be able to prevent that at times. So you'll see it, if somebody's holding a plank and they can't prevent that at all, you'll see their hips sag down. But even sometimes when they prevent that, they'll use their lower back to hold their hips up in that position. So you have to get feedback from them. So I want to see that. Is it a bracing issue where they're not able to brace their core, or is it an actual core strength issue? And we'll delve into that at a different time, but I do want to see that first. And then I want to look at how mobile are the hips. Do they have proper flexibility through the hip flexors? What do the hamstrings look like? How does the femur internally rotate and externally rotate? So turn inward and turn outward. If there's severe limitations, especially if there's asymmetry, so differences from side to side, then those are areas of concern. I want to try to clean up that core stability. I want to try to clean up the hip mobility first, then see what happens to the pain, and then we'll go from there. And I think that is not how lots of people look at lower back pain. I think they think of lower back pain and they think of the movements that they should not do anymore, and they quit doing those movements. And again, you should not.
I did this. This is me.
Yeah.
I did this.
You stopped deadlifting.
I stopped.
Right?
I did no legs.
Right.
Because I was afraid of any type of compression because I had that anti-extension issue.
Right.
And I also had a bracing issue as well on top of the hip flexor complex.
You had some of the tightest hamstrings I've ever seen in my life, too.
Yeah. I remember the day I touched my toes for the first time.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, that's a real thing. I mean, I was in that bad of a spot.
Yeah.
So.
For sure.
Yeah.
And again, we're not saying that you should not, if you're having pain during a movement, yes, stop doing the movement, but don't stop doing the movement for good.
Correct it.
Yeah. Correct what's happening, figure out your limitations, work on those limitations, and then see if you're going to be able to get back to the movement. But don't just call it, don't end of the world it and be like, I'll never be able to do X, Y, and Z ever again. Find out if you have these issues, and then start to work on those issues and see if that pain doesn't get better. A lot of times it will. Sometimes it won't, and there's some other things going on, and then you need some outside help, and we're never afraid to refer out at all, and we luckily work with some great doctors in our area. So I think that is very important. But again, you should look at these limitations and see if you can do some basic exercises to overcome them.
And that's the thing. I would say low back, and you correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, obviously you have your extreme cases, always, but from generally speaking, is really pretty easy to address.
A lot of times, the general low back pain.
General low back pain.
It can get obviously super complicated when things are going on in the spine and stuff like that. But a lot of back pain, and we've had this.
Yeah.
You were a great example again. Fix the hip mobility, fix the core stability.
Yeah.
Sometimes they do have some T-spine mobility issues. work on those kind of things. Again, you can look right on our website for a lot of these different exercises based on whatever joint it is you're trying to mobilize or stabilize. But do those things, work on the things you're supposed to work on, and then find out where you are. Don't just give up or give in to a certain scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything you'd like to add, sir?
I think that for anybody that's interested in any of the stuff, as they should be, you can go right to our website and see a lot of these different movements and how we would assess them, and then also some of the corrections for them, some good mobility exercises, some good stability exercises for corresponding joints of wherever you might be having issues. And that way, that'll give you some kind of guidance and some kind of at least base knowledge to get you where you want to go. Again, whether it's physique or it's something you want to be more athletic or you just want to be generally healthier. So I think that's a good idea.
And we definitely, one of the things to just kind of build on your point is that, and I just talked about it, but we kind of want to shed light on these things. It's not to put like a cloud over everything, it's to shed light that there is ways to fix this.
Absolutely. I think that sometimes there's people get, they'll have some kind of pain and they'll get news that it's just all doom and gloom. And without this, if you don't do this, or if you don't get this surgery or whatever, or you need to stop doing these exercises, the world could end if you do this or that or whatever. Like, I think that's a big problem in our society today. Instead of, okay, I have this knee pain going on, what are some limitations that I have movement-wise, and how can I fix those? Let's try to do that first, and then figure out if the pain gets better or doesn't get better, and then we can start to look at some of these other scenarios where I might have to stop doing something I like, or actually get a major surgery.
And that's what I would say. I would say this is kind of the Madlab way. We look, assess, mobility is important. We build the body up. Correct?
Correct.
From a movement, we're not going to load anything to, like you said, to cause more dysfunction. It's about being as mobile.
Don't add strength to a dysfunction.
Yeah. And as always, if you like this conversation, we hope you like this conversation. We're also on Twitter and Instagram. Please give us a follow. I know you all have those because all you do is just sit on your phone all day. So please give us a like and a follow.
Thank you so much for that, Luke. And thank you, everyone, for this has been another edition of The Lab.